So a few days ago, I posted this screenshot on LinkedIn, and the caption for it was something along the lines of, when you ask Codex to design a compliance review process for you, and it's not exactly bringing its A game. And I thought it was funny. I think the point of it is I was trying to blame Codex for designing something overly complex and sort of hard to visualize. And then as I started to think about it, I realized it's not Codex's fault, it's mine. And it's not necessarily even a bad thing, but when you look at this screenshot, what you're going to notice is that there are a lot of input attributes on any step. There are usually one output attribute. Of course, in Argyll, you can have multiple output attributes as well. But the way that the actual setup works is correct from the point of view of the process itself. And I think this paints a better picture of understanding what the value proposition of Argyll actually is. It is not a traditional workflow engine. It's not even a traditional orchestrator in the sense that you basically have simple DAGs where you have one line edge going possibly to one other node, and or maybe more than one node, but it's always one edge, right? Much the way that you would visualize any traditional flow. Argyll is different in the sense that the currency between the steps in Argyll flows are the attributes, and that means that you're able to model incredibly complex flows of data between steps where the engine itself, when it creates an execution plan, can actually resolve those dependencies across all of the steps. Not like magic. I mean, it's a deterministic algorithm that figures these things out, but it allows you to create incredibly decoupled systems, and their only job is to declare what they require in order to be able to start and what they will emit as the result of having processed whatever inputs they've received. So they're functions at the end of the day. And so it could be that the way that I decided to visualize it early was just really informed by, history, what I kind of have come to expect in visualizing diagrams of systems like this, and just it doesn't hold well. I think that that's the main problem. So, it got me thinking how to deal with this. How do you deal with this gobbledygook? It's absolutely frightening. And I experimented with just removing some of the lines, meaning like if there's any attribute that goes from one step to another step, then I want to have one edge going out toward that step. And surprisingly, at the end of the day, it didn't make much of a difference. I think, the big difference was sort of the number of like handles on each step widget, but really you still had all those lines. I mean, they were still there, and it was still kind of hard to sort of follow and traverse the flow. Again, I'm gonna point this out is that Codex actually did this correctly. I gave it exactly what it needed. It produced the all of the step definitions, and then the auto wiring that happens in the plan builder, and then in the web UI, it did what it was supposed to do, and it did as good of a job as you could expect, given all of the data that needs to flow around this compliance process. So, kudos to Codex for figuring this out, and then, shame on me for kind of being naive in believing that all processes would look simple, when in fact in the real world they just don't. So let's let's talk about some of the things that I changed to try to help that. I started to thinking about like other alternatives for visualizing these flows, like sequence diagrams, for example, which I'm still thinking I might want to do. But even the concept of a sequence diagram has some problems in that, in a normal sequence diagram, you have like this service calls that service with, maybe potentially optionally described payload, and then you can see the arrow going from like, one service line to the next service line in sort of a timeline. That could work, in fact. But I think from the point of view of Argyll, that probably can only work on the live preview mode, meaning when you're watching the flow as it progresses, a sequence diagram actually might make a lot of sense. So I'm going to experiment with that in the future. But for right now, I wanted to sort of highlight some of the changes that I made in being able to visualize things sort of in real time and just explore the graph, because I think that that's going to get us part of the way where we need to go. So let's do that. These are some of the changes that I made. Now you're familiar with this diagram. It's the typical diagram. And then, the idea is like you select a goal step and it will preview the plan based on that goal step. One of the things that I did to try to help things is that I got rid of the start flow modal dialog. It no longer exists. It is now incorporated into the overview mode of Argyll. What that means is that the overview mode is specifically designed now to start flows and to sort of be able to navigate and traverse and understand the graph itself. Because instead of having to go back and forth to do those things, it doesn't make any sense. You might as well just have it all in one place, because from a use case point of view, that's what I was always doing anyway. And so this just sort of reduces the number of steps in order to reach that. So what you can see here is we have now merged everything. You've got your goal steps, and the good thing about that, right, is that I can say, hey, I need multiple goal steps, right? And so now you have multiple goal steps actually chosen. And of course, as I add and remove them, it's also giving you the required attributes that you must provide in order to be able to even start a flow given these goal steps. But we're not interested in that right now. I'm just going to do notification sender, which is the typical use case. I could also say, yeah, Docker reservation. That's all I want to be able to achieve. But notification sender is fine. And then what you might remember from before is that I do some animation for the attributes so that you can visualize the flow of attributes between steps. So, for example, if I go to order over in the attributes table, you're immediately going to see sort of the animation of the order output attribute flowing to where it's actually required by the payment processor and the stock reservation system. Straightforward, right? That's kind of the idea. And then as you tab through these, you're going to see, it changes to show the attribute that you actually have highlighted. That's kind of the idea. It just makes it a little bit easier to visualize things, and so you kind of get a better sense of what the hell's actually happening, and that'll become even more important in more complex setups, which I'm going to show you right now. So let me really quick. I'm gonna stop the current version of Docker. And so, it's reconnecting, everything's gone. And then I'm going to start it up naked. Specifically, it won't have any steps when we start. It'll take a second or so. We got to wait. Blah, blah, blah. Here it comes. All right, connecting again. Or at least it's trying to. There's Vite. So it's reloading. And what you can see now is that there are no steps registered because when I took Docker down, I wiped out all the volumes. So there's just no data. It started up in a raw state. I'm going to go back. Now what I want to do is I want to go to the compliance review project, and then I'm just going to start the steps. Just let them run. And then what you can see, it looked like one was already running. It's fine. What you can see is here's the diagram. It's basically the diagram that you saw in the screenshot, but it's in light mode rather than dark mode if you really, really want dark mode. One of the other things I changed about the UI is I got rid of the legend. I also got rid of the letters that made no sense, and now in the list for goal steps, it's just the type of the goal step that might be more informative. Another thing that you're seeing here is that we actually have the full state of the entire cluster. I've added that in the last week. And so as the services are coming up, and once all of the services are actually reachable, the health status for that specific step becomes healthy. As soon as any one of them has any problems, you'll actually be able to granularly see which node in the cluster actually has problems. So that's kind of the idea. It's another change that I made last week. It's not as important. Anyway, so the idea now is that, if I click apply review policy, because I can do sort of the live preview of what the upstream dependencies are or the providers happen to be, you can kind of understand where where these lines are coming from and going to. It's a little easier, because everything sort of grays out and goes in the background. And the other thing is that you can, as you go through the attributes, you can also say, hey, what's application type? Where's that coming from? And here you have a visual indicator that's the one place it's referred to. These are all going to be the required inputs of ingest documents. But as we get into the actual other attributes, like, for example, extracted entities, you can see that extracted entities flows to 3 different steps. And so, from there it goes to classify risk, which needs it, I guess. Check sanctions needs it as well. And then apply review policy also needs it. So then, as you go on, you can also see that the parse documents output of OCR parse documents also flows outward to extract entities AI, and then it also flows out to apply review process as well. This can give you some idea of like how you might want to lay things out so that they make a little more sense. So like here, for example, maybe that's the better place for it. I don't know, but it might help. So yeah, as you go though, say submission basically flows everywhere. What you can see is like it goes to what 2, 3, 4 different steps. The submission output, because from a dependency point of view, and again from a decoupling point of view, you don't necessarily want to just keep sort of accreting information and having it flow as one big bomb that goes through your process. You only want to give steps the information that they absolutely need in order to process and nothing else. And so Argyll actually does that. It basically puts together only the attribute bundling that it needs to provide to a step for the step to run based on the declaration of its inputs. So that's the idea. It's it looks complex when you don't have anything selected, right? But as you're navigating, it gets a little bit easier to kind of understand, where the connections are, and especially once you start sort of incorporating the attribute flow, it helps to be able to visualize things a little bit better. So that's the idea. Is it final? Probably not. I'm going to still keep considering how best to visualize these things. At the end of the day, really though, Argyll is just it's an engine. It's actually API first. The web UI is sort of, it was for me an afterthought. I wanted to be able to visualize things and be able to sort of see flows that were running and stuff like that. But generally speaking, the intended way for it to work is purely through API calls. And possibly even like infrastructure as code in order to define the steps themselves. So this is sort of a nicety. But I will continue to work on this stuff, just because there's got to be an ideal way to visualize this stuff. It's incredibly complex stuff. I think the one thing that I've started to realize about Argyll over the last week or so as well is that, it's different than an orchestrator. It has a lot. It allows you to model really complex things for decoupled services in very very easy ways. I mean, it's actually easy to create this mess. But the fact is that it maintains sort of the correctness of it all and makes sure everything actually happens, which is kind of the whole point of the application in the first place. And I've started to think about, use cases. One of the things that I've been thinking about is AI in general and how to orchestrate AI processes, and currently the way that people do it is through things like, I don't know, just your current state of the art for AI orchestration is almost non-deterministic, orchestrators where an LLM might spit out some garbage and then the orchestrator just does whatever it says, and you can just sort of end up in high cost, churning and loops and stuff like that. Definitely, Argyll is not going to be able to provide that. It's you declare things. It's deterministic. It's a fixed plan once it's been created, and so it's not going to be the best use case. But it could be a good use case for actually taming AI processes. Meaning, you have a flow. You want to make sure that it only does exactly what the flow describes, and that the AI can't sort of get away with itself and go crazy. I think that one might be one use case for it, but I'm not worried about that right now. I think from my point of view, it's more about like the decoupled systems aspect of it all, and so that's where we are. Another big change in the last week. If you remember my video from the previous week, I was ranting and raving around about bbolt, and it being sort of the persistence mechanism in the Raft backend. One of the problems with bbolt, I found out, is that it is a B tree at the end of the day, and B trees, even though they should be, O log n, I think. I can't remember what their big O is. They do degrade pretty quickly in the face of like high load and a lot of data volume being pumped through them. And so I ended up backing out of that. And for the persistence mechanism in the Raft backend, I am now using BadgerDB, which is actually write optimized, and has a wall write ahead log, and it is just tearing things up. I went from something like 3,000 flows per second under load to being able to do about 9,000, 10,000 flows per second. So we're up there now in Redis Redis territory with like fsync every second, with the write ahead log. So the performance now is comparable and acceptable from that point of view. And I'm just going to continue to work on the Raft impl, because there's these weird edge cases with Raft whenever you have a consensus algorithm. So I've been fixing some bugs over the last week, and it's shaping up pretty nicely. Let's put it that way. So yeah, that's it. Those are the things that have happened over the last week in the Argyll project. Again, it may be the next time I do an update that this visualization is completely different. But for now, it will have to do, because these flows can get really complex, and the value proposition of Argyll is really the whole idea of the routing of these attributes, and not necessarily the singular connectivity between the steps in the chart. And so I'm going to keep it, and there you have it. So have a good week.